I want to walk you through the entire process of setting up your configuration for your build. This is going to be starting from flashing firmware all the way up to setting up your drone for your first flight. This is going to be a long video. We're going to work through the entire process together. So set aside some time and we'll work through this together. Now you notice I have Q ground control open. If you do not have Q ground control installed, you can go to this website right here. github.com/mavling/Q ground control/releases. And when you scroll down, this is the first stable version here, 4.4.4. I had some difficulty installing this due to some library packages, and it wasn't running efficiently or properly. So I went ahead and installed version 4.4.3, and that worked perfectly for me the first time. In order to install your Q ground control, you need to click on Assets, and when you do, you're going to populate with this installer package here, and you can choose one for Windows, which is EXE, or you can choose one for Mac if you have a Mac. To get started, you want to leave your USB disconnected. When you click on this icon, and the reason I say that, we'll click on Vehicle Setup here, is because we're going to go to the Firmware tab, and this is the place where we're actually going to start loading the stable firmware. So when you click on Firmware, you're going to plug in your USB to your autopilot, and it should recognize and come up with the firmware setup. Perfect. So we're going to pick the stable version and then click on OK. And it's going to run through its checks, erase the old firmware, and put the new one on. Okay, we are connected and we are ready to go. The first thing that I want to identify, now you might see this as a red icon in which you'll have to adjust your airframe settings there, but we're going to click on that just to verify the correct airframe that we want to set. And yes, right here, generic quadcopter. So you're going to select this icon. If you select this icon, it's going to turn yellow. If you select this icon, it's going to turn yellow. You don't have to pick from the drop down because this is specific to certain types of build. We're just going to leave it on generic quadcopter. Once you pick that, you'll click on Apply and Restart. So we know our airframe is selected. Yep, generic quadcopter X right there. And now we're going to click on Sensors. Now this is the portion where you got to calibrate your compass, your gyroscope, your accelerometer, and also your level horizon. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to calibrate our level horizon. So when you click on that, it's going to say to level the horizon, you need to place the vehicle in its level flight position and leave still. So it is on the table, nice and level, and I'm going to press OK. The next one we want to do is our accelerometer. Now the autopilot orientation, we're going to leave to none because the arrow is facing forward. And when we click on OK here, it's going to ask us to place it in these positions. So the first one, there we go. The second one we're going to place on its back, and we're going to hold it nice and still. There we go. Place it on its nose. And it might be helpful to have a table that you can set this on. And the next one's going to be on its back. Next one is on the left side. And the next one is on the right side. There we go. Calibration is complete for the accelerometer. The next one we'll move on to is the gyroscope. And it's asking for gyros to calibrate. You will need to place your vehicle on a surface and leave still, just like the level horizon. So we'll press OK. There we go. Now the compass is a little bit different. Okay. you have to be outside to do this. So right now I'm connected via USB, but I'm going to shortly here disconnect my USB and plug in via my telemetry and connect my battery to my drone and go set it outside while I do this calibration. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to press cancel for just a second. I'm going to get connected via telemetry and we'll start that process. Okay, now you can see we are connected via telemetry, so we have a wireless connection set up. I'm going to go back into sensors and I'm going to click on compass. Now before I press OK, I want to make sure that I'm outside with my drone in a level position because the calibration will start at that point. So I'm going to go set my drone outside and come back and press OK. All right, the drone is outside. I'm just about ready to start my compass calibration. Make sure that my autopilot orientation is set to none because the arrow is facing forward. And I will press OK. All right, students, it looks like my calibration has successfully completed. Before I reboot the vehicle, because it's asking me to do this, I know from previous experience setting this up that the orientation of the compass itself, the GPS, needs to be rotated 180 degrees. To do that, we're going to select Mag 0 orientation, and we're going to change that to rotation on yaw 180 degrees. So we're actually going to offset it 180 degrees, and you'll see once we get GPS that that orientation will be correct. So go ahead and select that and reboot vehicle. Okay, students, we are back, reconnected. The vehicle has been rebooted, and now I want to finish the setup using my USB cable to manually plug into your autopilot. Once your sensors have been calibrated, you're going to head on over to your radio, and this is where you're going to calibrate your radio. Now, to calibrate your radio, it's going to have to be on, so go ahead and turn on your radio, and then you're going to click on Calibrate. So we'll press OK, and it's asking me lower the throttle stick all the way down as shown in the diagram. This is important because it wants to know what value is assigned to low throttle. So mine is at low right now. Click Next. Move the throttle stick all the way up and hold it there. Move the throttle stick all the way down and leave it there. Next is yaw stick to the right. Next is yaw stick to the left. Next is roll stick all the way to the right. Roll stick to the left. Pitch stick all the way up. Pitch stick all the way down. And pitch stick back to the center. The next thing we're going to do is move all the switches and transmitter functions. Before we do that, I want to show you something here. Now, to be able to move your sticks, switches, and transmitters, there's a few things that you're going to have to set up in your radio before this can be done. So the first thing that we're going to do is when you go into your radio, you're going to long press mode, and then you're going to go to aux channels by using this push wheel right here. When you select aux channels, it's going to bring you up to this function. This is important because we want to assign a switch to arming and we want to assign a switch to flight modes. Now in my arming, I have switch SF, or SWF or switch F, which is set up on the bottom side of my radio for my left index finger when I'm flying. And my flight mode switch is set up to switch C, which is on the right side of the radio on the top side. Now it's important that I'm identifying these here right now because when you're flying, you definitely want to have your arm switch and your flight mode switch separate from your control stick movements. So you don't want to accidentally hit your arm switch when you're trying to flip a flight mode. So I like to separate those on the radio as far as possible. When you click on right here your aux channel, channel 5 I have set up as SWF. So you'll see here in a moment on Q ground control where that is located. For switch C, I have that set up on channel 6. And this is what it looks like when you click right here and you click on channel 6, you're going to go to this section right here. And this is where you can set up your switch. So you just highlight that, pick the switch that you want, and now that switch is assigned to channel 6. And what I've done here is set up altitude mode, GPS mode, and return to launch mode. This isn't really important on your radio side of things, but it is going to be important in Q ground control when we set up our flight modes. So I just wanted to point this out. This is how you set up your flight modes. Remember, you can go to your aux channel section when you long press mode, and from there you'll be able to pick channel 5 and channel 6 for your flight modes and your arm switch. Okay, now that we have that all dialed up, I'm going to go ahead and start flipping my aux switches, every single one that I can, including my dials and the little rotator knobs on the bottom. There we go. Flip those all back and we will click next. Okay, so we have successfully calibrated our radio controller. We have our switches set to output on those respective channels, and now we can go and set up our flight modes. I have my arm switch set up on channel 5 right there, which is my F switch. So I'm gonna set up my arm switch to be on channel 5 because I know when I flick that switch, it's gonna attempt to arm. Now channel 6 is gonna be my C switch. There's a 3-position switch there, so first position, second position, and third position. Perfect. So in this position, when my switch is all the way forward, I want to assign that to be channel 6. And the first flight mode that I want is going to be altitude hold. The next flight mode that we're going to set up, which is going to be in the middle, as you flip your switch, you can actually see where the value is that you want to change. So flight mode, this one's going to be GPS or position hold. And the last one is going to be return to launch or return. So when I first take off, all my switches are forward. I'm going to be set up in altitude hold mode. It's going to drift with the wind, but it will hold its altitude. And then the next flight mode is position mode. That's the middle switch. That's going to hold position in 3D space, and if something were to go awry and I needed to bring it back, there's 2 options that I could do. I could switch into altitude mode and bring it back, or if I'm far away and I want to return to home, I flip it into return to home and it will return to the spot it took off from. Okay, so now that our flight mode switch are set up, I want to address something real quick. And that is the difference between stick arming and switch arming. So stick arming is where you move your throttle, and let me go to the radio so you guys can see this. When you move your throttle all the way down and to the right, so throttle down and yaw right, that's going to be stick arming. If you move it down and to the left, that's stick disarming. So I want to point something out here because in the parameters section, there's a parameter called MAN_arm_gesture right here. When this value is disabled, that means that you have to use a switch to arm your aircraft. When this value is enabled, that is stick arming. I like to have my arming sequence set up on a switch. It's a very tactile thing. I know if the aircraft is armed or if it's disarmed just by pressing that switch. And I don't have to actually remember, okay, well, I got to move my throttle down and to the right or down and to the left to disarm. So I find it a lot easier to have it on a tactile switch. So I leave that value disabled. But if you did want to do stick arming where you pull the throttle down and to the right to arm, then you would go over here and you would change that to enabled. Okay? So now that the flight modes are set up, we have our channel 5 set to arming, we have our flight mode set up. Now it's time to configure the power section. So we are connected via USB, and we want to get our battery connected. When you do connect your battery here, you want to make sure that you have a fully charged battery. Mine has been fully charged, and these are the values that you want to set it to. So number of cells in series, we know we have a 4-cell battery. The empty voltage per cell, typically this is going to default to 3.5, but to be on the safe side, I like to set it to 3.6 because, you know, we have built a new aircraft and we want to be certain that it's not going to fall out of the sky. So we want it to warn us a little bit sooner. So that value is going to be 3.6. This value right here, fully charged cell, this one's going to be 4.15. And when you hit calculate, the measured voltage is going to be 16.8. I know that because I just charged my battery and that's a full battery. And when I hit on calculate, notice the difference in this number here that changes every time I click on it. 10.8, 10.94, 11.06, 10.93. So you can see it's kind of fluctuating every time we hit calculate. It's getting the best voltage divider number for you that you can. So once we hit calculate, we click on close, and that section is done. Now we want to calibrate the ESCs, and we're going to do it through this section right here. It's going to say ESC PWM minimum and maximum calibration. Before we calibrate this, we have to make sure that our motors are set up properly. If you click on actuators, now I bring up these important 3 tabs because the aux tab, if I bring over this picture right here, you can see on the PIXHawk, you see up here how it says aux out, main out, and then you have the other 2 right here. We have connected our ESCs to main out 1 through 4 with the ground wire facing up towards the ground port. So we want to configure the main section to output any values on the main port. We don't want to do any of the aux ports. We want to configure the main ports. See here we have disabled. So we actually need to assign motor 1 to main 1. And then motor 2. And you can see every time we do that, it's recognizing a signal. So motor 3 is going to be on this channel here. Perfect. And motor 4. Excellent. Now that we have our motors assigned to their respective values, we can actually go back to the power section and start to calibrate our ESCs. Now before we do that, we have to unplug the battery. Okay, the battery is unplugged. Now when you click on minimum and maximum calibration, please make sure that your props are removed on the bench. So go ahead and click on calibrate, and then it's going to ask you to connect the battery. There we go. Our ESCs are calibrated. Our actuators are set up. We have our PWM mains. Yes, that's correct. Now it's time to test the motor direction. So please make sure that your props are off for this. To enable the motor direction, you're going to click on this tab right here, but I want you to notice the motor orientation. So the front of the aircraft's facing this way. Motor 1 is in the front right. Motor 2 is in the rear left. Motor 3 is in the front left, and motor 4 is in the rear right. So once we click on that, let's go ahead and spin up motor 1. Okay, so I'm checking direction right here, and motor 1 is spinning counterclockwise. That's exactly what we want. If it's not spinning the correct direction and motor 1 is spinning clockwise, then go ahead and disconnect your battery and swap 2 of the bullet connectors. So it doesn't matter which 2 you swap, just unplug 2 bullet connectors, swap them, and then your motors will change direction. Next one is motor 2. Okay, awesome. Motor 2 is spinning counterclockwise, and then motors 3 and 4 should spin clockwise. Motor 3 is in the right spot, front left. It's spinning clockwise. and motor 4 is in the rear right, and it is spinning clockwise. Perfect. So I actually nailed those the first time. That's awesome. Okay, so we know our motor directions are spinning the correct way. We know that motor 1 responds to motor 1. We've calibrated our ESCs. Everything's good there. We have our arm switch. We have our flight mode switch. The next thing we want to move on is to the safety section. Now this is your safety section. There's a few things that we want to set here, and the first one's going to be your low battery fail-safe trigger. Now by default, it's typically a bit low for 15, 7, and 5%, especially for your first flight validation. So what we want to do is we want to set this to return at critical level and land at emergency level. And we're going to set these values to 30%, 20%, and 10%. So when your battery reaches this point here at 30% battery capacity, it's going to warn you with the buzzer. When it reaches 20% battery capacity, it's going to perform a fail-safe action, i.e. return to home. And if it ever reaches the 10% threshold, then it will just land in place. So the RC loss fail-safe trigger, this is the value that we want to adjust. We want to set it to return mode, and we want it to set for 2 seconds. So if you lose link on your radio transmitter within 2 seconds, if you don't regain that link, it's going to return to home. The next value that we want to set up is the data link loss failsafe trigger. And that value we want to set up for 10 seconds, but we want it to return to home. So if you lose telemetry connection within 10 seconds, then your aircraft will return to home. The next one we're going to set up is your geofence failsafe trigger. This is a kind of a radius and an altitude that if your aircraft breaches for any reason, then you can set an action for it to perform to come home or hold in place or warn or terminate or just land in place. For this option, we're going to select return mode, and we're going to set a max radius of about 400 feet here, and we're going to set a max altitude of 300 feet. All right, now that that's set up, the next thing we want to look at is our return to launch settings. Now this value is very important here. This is going to be determined from where you decide to fly at. So if you travel to a park, if you travel to an open area, just make sure that whatever value this sets, this is the value in feet that your aircraft will return to home if it fail safes or if you flip that flight mode switch into return to launch. Okay, so this value needs to be higher than any obstacle in the area of your operations. So if you go out to your field and you notice you have power lines over 100 feet, you need to set this value a little bit higher than the power lines that are out there. Typically, a value of 100 feet is going to be sufficient for most operations, but this is definitely something that you want to pay attention to when you go and fly your aircraft for the first time. Once it hits return to launch, if it does, if you flip it into flight mode switch, or if you have a fail safe, these are the options that it's going to do once it reaches that altitude and it starts to descend. The one that I like to set is land immediately because I want to return to home and come down and land. I don't want it to loiter and do not land because there could be a problem with my battery or there could be a problem with my radio. I want it to land immediately. And the landing descent rate, this is all default, really good here, really good values here. We won't mess with that. And vehicle telemetry logging, we will leave that at default. Same with the hardware in the loop simulation. Okay, so that's most of our setup now. The last two things that I want to address are in the parameter section. CBRK _ IO _ safety. This is the safety switch on your aircraft. When this value is set to 22027, that means that the safety switch is disabled and you don't have to press it to arm your aircraft. But if for some reason you do want to use the safety switch and you do want to press it just to be safe, then you would set that value to 0 and you would click save, and that would allow you to press the safety switch to arm your aircraft. Okay, and the next value that I want to check is CBRK underscore supply underscore check. So this value right here, now if you set it to 894281, it will disable the power validation checks in the Pixhawk autopilot. To set this value to disabled, you want to set it to 894281 and click save. So now we'll do a soft reboot on all of that there. And it looks like we are good to go here. So right here, I know that my aircraft is actually facing 90 degrees from the street here, and in fact it is. The autopilot is facing that direction, so that compass orientation was correct. And if I turn it 90 degrees to the right, you will see that it is facing away from the street. Excellent. Well, that concludes the setup and process. And if you have any questions, please make sure to reach out to your instructor.